Hey guys, today we are finishing up our last set of notes for Chapter 1. 1.7 is all about evaluating expressions. So this is kind of just an extension of what we were doing yesterday for our notes for 1.6 with order of operations. Because if we're trying to evaluate an algebraic expression, it's really just some substitution for our variables with particular values that we were given, and then we're just following those same order of operations. So we know an algebraic expression is just an expression that contains one or more variables. And if we're trying to evaluate those, we're going to just substitute the variables for their given values. From there, we just follow order of operations like we did yesterday. So it shouldn't be too tough, really just making sure we're substituting correctly and then following order operations. So as usual, we're going to go ahead and do the odd problems first, and then we can go ahead and, if you want to do the practice problems as evens, feel free to knock your socks off. So for number 1, we have 7x plus 4y, and we're trying to evaluate that if x is 5 and y is negative 3. So just to make sure that we are substituting correctly, I will always put our values that we're substituting for x or for y or whatever our variable is in parentheses. That's going to guarantee that we're following order of operations correctly, especially when you have a value like with y that's going to be a negative. So when I substitute, if all I do is substitute 5 for my x value and negative 3 for my y, I now just follow order of operations. So like we did yesterday, PEMDAS, we don't need to simplify inside any parentheses. We don't have any exponents to evaluate. So with this, our first step is just that multiplication step, which because these don't affect each other, I can do my 7 times 5 and my 4 times negative 3 simultaneously. So this gives me 35 plus a negative 12, which we know is the same thing as 35 minus 12. So we get 23 for that first one, 23 for number 1. Okay. Obviously, they'll get more complicated. With number 3, we've got 4m squared plus 5m if m is negative 2. So once again, I'm just going to replace m with negative 2, and I'm going to leave the rest the same. So now I have to make sure I do this carefully because my squared value here is just on m, so it's just on the negative 2. Because order operations tells me I have to evaluate those exponents first before I multiply. So I have to do negative 2 squared before I multiply by 4. So if I do just my exponent, negative 2 squared is 4. Then I can do all my multiplication steps because, again, they're separate from each other. So that should give me 16 minus 10, which comes out to positive 6. Okay, moving along to number 5. Number 5, we've got 2 variables, a and b, in our expression. So if we're going to go ahead and substitute 3 for my a value, 2 for my b value, in my parenthesis, this is 2 times 3, 3 times 2, just to make sure it's consistent. Squared minus 4 times b is 2, cubed plus 1. So now I do have a parenthesis that has an operation inside that I can simplify and need to first. So 3 times 2 being 6. And that's everything else stays the same for right now. Obviously, like we talked about yesterday with our order of operations, you could, if your kind of brain can organize things, do things not necessarily explicitly in order of operations, but as long as they don't affect each other, you could combine different steps together. Like here, I could have multiplied my 6 or my 3 times 2 to get 6 squared, but then evaluated the exponent in my next one instead of having to wait and do them all separately. But that's always up to you. So now I do my exponents. 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 2 cubed is 8, and then plus my 1. So now, moving along, I've got my multiplication there in the middle that I still have to do. So 36 minus 32 plus 1. That adds up to a total of 5. 5 is that grand total. For number 7, W is negative 4, V is positive 1. So as I go through and start doing substitutions, what I have to be careful of here, especially when I'm dealing with negatives or subtractions, is keeping that sign organized and making sure I keep that sign correct. Because for this one, negative 4 minus 1, right, because we're subtracting a positive 1 squared, plus 2 times positive 1 minus 7 times negative 4. Oops. Trying to keep it consistent. There we go. So inside my parentheses for that first one, negative 4 minus another 1 is a negative 5 squared, plus 2 times 1 minus 7 times negative 4. So for this now, I'm going to square my first term, but then do the multiplication steps for the other two. So I can do these kind of separately, since they don't interact with each other until we start using that addition. With that last one, just be careful because you're subtracting and you have a negative 4 there, so that ends up being a positive 28 in the grand scheme of things, so plus 28. So 25 plus 2 plus 28 gives me a grand total of 55. 55. All right. Flipping it on over. That's really, we'll get more complicated and complex problems, but that's the process. It's really just substituting values, and then it's order of operations. So with number 9, we've got 3c squared minus cd plus 7d squared. And in this case, c is negative 3 and d is negative 2. So we've got 3 times, I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to be a little more creative. Plus 7 squared. So I'm just rewriting everything except for my variables. So now c was negative 3. D is negative 2. For both of those two spots, there we go. I like that better, instead of having to switch back and forth in my ink. So now, order of operations, we've got to do our exponents first. In that middle term, since I'm doing kind of a step, might as well multiply those two numbers together. Or if you want to wait till you do all of your multiplications, that's fine. But here, 9 is what negative 3 squared is, minus negative 3 times negative 2 is a positive 6, so it's minus 6, plus 7 times negative 2 squared is 4. So now we've got 27 minus 6 plus 28. So that adds up to 49 in total. 49. Continuing along our merry way. Positive 3 for my A value and positive 12 for my B. So with this one, like we talked about yesterday, I'm going to go ahead and get these situated first. Squared B. A was 3. B is 12. Our fractions, like we talked about yesterday, act as kind of a grouping tool. So even though there's not parentheses around my numerator and parentheses around my denominator, I am still going to evaluate those as if they were grouped together, because in a fraction, they are. We have to simplify our numerator and our denominator before we can combine them together. So if I go ahead and start up top, I've just got those 3 that are being multiplied together. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 12 gives me 72. Down below, let's see, our squared we have to do before we can do anything else. I could do 7 times 12 right away to get 84, minus 9 times 12. So if I work down now instead, 72 over 84 minus 108 is 9 times 12, which gives me 72 over negative 24, which actually simplifies all the way down to just up negative 3. Negative 3. All right, 2 more. We're getting close. 2 more. All right, so we've got 28 minus 4y squared over x, y minus 2x squared. And then this one, x is negative 8, y is negative 5. So we can start with all of our exponent stuff. So 28 minus 4 times 25 over, we can combine that together to 40 minus 2 times 64. So I've got to multiply kind of the second term of both of my numerator and my denominator. So 28 minus 100 over 40 minus 128, which gives me negative 72 over a negative 88. You can reduce top and bottom by negative 8, and we end up with a positive 9 over 11. Last one. So this one, my C value is 2 over 9, and my D value is negative 4. So if we've got 3 over 4 times minus 1 over 6 times, my C was 2/9. That looks like Z9. Let's try that again. 2/9. And then my D is negative 4, which if we want to, we could do negative 4 over 1. Make it easier on ourselves down the road. So remember from our very first section of this chapter with fractions, when we're multiplying fractions, you just multiply straight across. So this ends up being 6 over 36. 3 times 2 is 6. 4 times 9 is 36. Minus, actually, plus 4 over 6. Remember, we're subtracting a negative 4 now, right? Because 1 times negative 4 is negative 4. 6 times 1 is 6. So negative 4 over 6. If we're subtracting negative 4/6, we're adding 4/6. So we've got 2 different options with trying to add our 6 over 36 plus 4/6 together, because we know we need a common denominator. You could multiply your right fraction, top and bottom, by 6 to get 24 over 36. But actually in this case, 6 over 36 reduces by 6, in which we end up with 1 over 6. So 1/6 plus 4/6 gives me 5/6. And that's my final answer. That's all we got for today. That's our full set of notes. So you guys have your homework. It's the worksheet. If you haven't grabbed it already, you can grab it from the desk. That's it for Chapter 1. That's our last lesson. So our next 2 days will just be reviewing for our test. So as always, if you guys have any questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas, hopes, or dreams, make sure you guys reach out and let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. We'll see you soon.